In his chapter on benevolence, Nitobe talks about Bushi no Nasake. This means the tenderness of a warrior, which I personally feel is the ultimate goal for a martial artist, but it's also the most overlooked thing in the martial arts world. Unfortunately, too many people, in my opinion, pursue what works on the street or what's effective in combat, and they're trying to constantly justify their technique and what they're doing on the mat, and is that effective? Is this, is this bogus? Is this fake? Whatever. But really, that has nothing to do with it if your goal is to understand Bushi no Nasake. Now, let me explain what Nitobe talked about when he was explaining this in his chapter on benevolence. He talks about how a warrior of olden times, the Bushi, would be able to show mercy only at a certain point when they've been able to cultivate it. You see, mercy isn't something that you're just born with. The ability to show mercy on an opponent wasn't something that you may have been ordered to do, but it wasn't something that was within you. It wasn't something that came out automatically. It was something that had to have been cultivated over time. And that cultivation came through trauma, through pain, through sacrifice, through victory, through accomplishment. But it was a constant trial by fire. It was a forging of the spirit, of the body, of your emotional intelligence, and it was something that took time. It took a lot of time and a lot of hardship to get to be able to show mercy. And then he talks about how having the power for the Bushi, being able to take a life or save the life, was something that was a very, very high order of a man, to be able to show and live with benevolence. And this is so important to understand, because as we study the martial arts, if we exist in a stiff and rigid type of learning environment, then that's exactly how it's going to be. We're not going to be able to expand the mental, spiritual, and physical dimension that we should be expanding into as martial artists and getting to the goal of Bushi no Nasake, being able to live with the tenderness of the warrior, being able to decide, being able to live a life where we can show mercy, but we can also be strong, where we can completely control the situation that we're in, regardless of how stressful it is, regardless of how dangerous it is, regardless of how life-threatening it may even be. I'm sure you've seen a lot of martial artists out there, and they're in this constant zone of having to justify their technique, having to justify what they're doing. Then you might see the argument of that would never work on the street, or that's old and antiquated. It's not, it's not something that would work now. And if the pursuit of Bushi no Nasake, the pursuit of self-control, the pursuit of having a higher understanding of things in life is what you're after, then your path is going to be different than someone who's looking for the most effective and quickest technique to be able to neutralize the human body. That's pretty easy to find. It's not so hard. Bushi no Nasake, being able to cultivate the ability to show mercy at any given time, the ability to be able to go from kill or save, and have the power to be able to do that, takes time. It takes sacrifice. It takes training. In the traditional Japanese martial arts world, yeah, of course, we do a lot of martial arts that are very antiquated and very primitive. But what's happening here in the role of each form, of each kata, of each weapon, of every time we spar, is that we're simulating this life cycle. We're simulating the life cycle of combative engagement, life cycle of being in a place where things are life-threatening for the moment. And there's an exchange that needs to be understood here. When I'm training with a colleague, and maybe they're just doing a simple judo one-arm shoulder throw, well, if that colleague of mine wants to drop down on their knee and put the crown of my head into the ground, they can. I've given myself over to them for that moment in time. And they could affect the future of my children, the future of my career. They could affect my ability to no longer teach because of the neck injury that I've incurred because of their choice or their physical negligence, whatever it may be. But what I've done is I've given over myself to them. I've given over my future. Everything is now in their hands. The exchange is when it's my turn to develop my skill, to make myself better, to make myself stronger, to make myself more eligible for this martial art that I study, is they then give themselves of me. And you see what's interesting here in this path to Bushi no Nasake is that those seconds turn to minutes eventually, which become hours, and the hours become days, and the days become months. Over the years of training, you spend so much time in this zone of non-existence, in the zone of sacrifice, in the zone of giving yourself over completely for others. When you exist in this space, and I would encourage the discussion with anybody who has had to put their life on the line in a place of combat. They're not thinking about rent, they're not thinking about work, they're not thinking about the fight that they just got in with their significant other, they're not thinking about all these really sort of minor details of life. They're thinking about the most basic and most important fundamental elements of life. And when you give yourself over in sacrifice, even though a one-arm shoulder throw might be a fraction of a second, again, added up over the years, you live in that place of non-existence, of giveness, of service to the art and to your colleague as an uke for years. And through that, you cultivate a sort of this feeling of non-existence, of simplicity. I think that there's another side to this that has to be explained. And that is when you train arts that are meant to destroy, over the years, you begin to develop this separation from the destructive parts of it. I'll tell you, as an instructor, teaching Japanese sword and the history of it, the biomechanics of lacerations and thrusting, and if I turn the sword this way and I thrust below this rib and I cut outward, what does that do? How to sever here, like all these different elements of proper sword combat, you begin to realize that the simulation of death over and over and over again, it begins to weigh on your spirit. It begins to transform you. And it can either transform you in one direction towards darkness or one direction towards simplicity and light. And that's the path of Bushido Nasake, being able to identify the horrors of the outcome of what it is that you're doing, but being able to control it so that you can save life with it, so that you can identify the more simple things in life and the importance that they hold and the value that they have in you. And I think that this is important for us as martial artists to express, whether it's if you're an instructor and you teach children, this is something you should put in your lessons. If you're a martial artist yourself, it's something that you should read about, you should study, and you should pursue. This is so important, the Bushi no Nasake that Nitobe talks about. I would encourage you to pursue it, go after it. Stop looking for what works on the street and this technique is better than that technique, or that martial artist is bogus, and pointing the fingers outward. Instead, spend more time looking in the mirror. We can all be tough, we can all be hard, we can all fight, we can all be stiff, we can be rigid, but tenderness, compassion, and the ability to show mercy, the ability to harness the power of saving or killing, that's up to you, and I'm talking metaphorically here, of course, is the goal, is the outcome. Being able to control the situation to what we want, not to get caught up in the chaos of melee all the time. That's not a good thing for your mind. It's not a good thing for your spirit. But to be able to pursue self-control. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this reflection that I have, something that I've been really mindful of over the last few months especially. If you enjoy this video, then I would love it if you subscribe to my channel. I post videos like this all throughout the week. And if you specifically like the message in this video and this reflection, then go ahead, please hit the like button. It helps get this message out, gives more visibility. And if you know anybody that would appreciate the message, please go ahead and share. Thank you for spending this time with me. I do deeply appreciate it.
Once again, I want to thank you for spending some time with me. If you enjoyed this episode and you haven't done so already, then please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. If you know somebody who would find some value from it, then please go ahead and share it with them. It helps get my message out. I don't broadcast these episodes on a schedule, but I do put them up pretty frequently, so make sure that you get updated if you enjoyed listening. Thanks so much, and if you haven't done so already, check me out at www.jisenkobudo.com. That's the website of my dojo. You can learn more about what I do there, and also check out my YouTube channel when you have a chance, and the link to that is in the show notes. Take care.